everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Pandemonium Zugdragonic Chapter 53 to 54, Demon Lords 4, updated, May 24, 2026. In the half-lit training room, inside the deepest reaches of the palace, Gazel's shadow interrupted the training to notify him of urgent news. My lord, an envoy has arrived from Blumend, Henrietta notified her king. Purpose of visit? Gazel replied in a displeased tone. His recent dissatisfaction wasn't due to the interruption, but rather due to the embarrassing show he put up in the recent skirmish against the orcs. Not only had he failed to subjugate the new demon lord, the orcs decided to join the newly founded sorcerer kingdom. On top of that, there was news of two emerging demon lords, one of which was the Mamanga fellow he'd met, and the other was the demon invading Blumend. In an attempt to amend his failures, Gazel has been rigorously training since the battle to better himself, and yet, he has seen no visible growth as far. Without an awakening or an event that engraves him into history, his growth has stagnated. Despite his efforts, he knows he has reached the limit of his potential for the time being. This was the true source of his frustration, for he could no longer grow, especially in this crucial time of need, when his intuition is telling him that an age of chaos was about to dawn upon every nation. Blumend has requested aid to fend off the new demon lord, Henrietta continued. Tell him I'll meet him in the throne room in 2 hours, Gazel gave a stern but quick reply as befitting of his status as king. Despite his calm demeanor and mental turmoil, he was calculating the benefits of assisting. While the army has fully recovered, to embark without so much as a break would break morale. Moreover, the cost of the expedition would certainly be just as high, if not higher, than last time. There's also the slightest chance that either he or Demon Lord Hyalton might be involved, since they're both demons. In fact, he is the most likely suspect, for the new demon looks to be of the red lineage. Black wouldn't do something like this, and the other primordials have known locations and appearances, so it shouldn't be a primordial. However, because a demon lord's life was sacrificed, I need to assume it's at least a prehistoric species. While pondering his choices, Gazel washed up to rid himself of the sweat before donning his usual royal outfit consisting of a pure white-plated armor, a golden crown, and a red cape. Enter, Gazel commanded his retainers to open the gate. Out from the door came a greyed man with dozens of scars on his face. Clearly, he's been through battlefields, and even more clearly, he's not what one would expect from a vassal. Unlike the armor one would expect him to wear, his outfit was more akin to that of a noble's. From this, Gazel concluded that the state of Blumend is just that desperate. They were unable to send figures with diplomatic background, instead sending someone who would normally belong on a battlefield. Using Tyrant, Gazel tried to read his opponent's mind. Fortunately, unlike the past few times he's used it on Mamanga, Ro, and the Orc disaster, the skill actually functioned like it's meant to. Through it, Gazel was able to see that the man before him was an honest man who held pride in his role as a knight. Greetings, King Gazel Dwargo, I am Ket, a knight serving King Blumend. State your purpose of visit. Of course. Blumend has fallen to the invasion of a greater demon, and we are requesting aid from Dworgen. Our king has created a list of compensation we're able to provide. He reached into his coat to bring out a long scroll. From there, Dorf walked over, receiving the document and presenting it to Gazel. We, the Kingdom of Blumend, will provide the following items: 20,000 gold coins as well as compensation for any damages caused by fending off the demons. Unrestricted and tax-free trade for merchants affiliated with Dworgen. A formal treaty where Blumend would aid Blumend in whatever military. Gazel set the scroll down, furrowing his brows at the absurdity of the terms of contracts. Yes, the terms were good. Yes, it would give them a lot of benefits. Yes, there was probably no other chance in the future to obtain a promise as solid as this one. However, there was one fatal flaw that Gazel noticed. All of these promises were made on the basis that Blumend would survive. It'd likely take a few dozen years, which wasn't long for dwarves, but for humans, it'd be far too long. The succeeding kings would likely oppose the terms created by Drum, and if a revolution were to overthrow the current rule, the rewards might as well be non-existent. This isn't even to account for the Great Tenma War, an event that restarted civilization every 500 years. Fortunately, Dworgen had been able to survive every war since its founding, but the same could not be said for the human nations. In a few years, the war would start, and Blumend would disappear either way due to the angels. Thus, this was a time frame far too short to reap any benefits. However, there might be one thing that Gazel could reap from this. You claim the demon is a greater demon, why? Well, King Gazel, the demon doesn't have a humanoid form yet. As demonology goes, the stronger a demon is, the more humanoid they appear. That's impossible. There's no way any greater demon would have nearly enough power to decimate a whole kingdom. The only explanation would be that the archdemon chose to take on a more monstrous form for fear-instilling purposes. Gazel pondered before asking another question. If you claim it to be a greater demon, then wouldn't your kingdom's night order be enough? It was far too strong. Despite being a mere greater demon, its strength seems to be befitting of its self-proclaimed title as Demon Lord. Did the demon demand anything from the kingdom? Based on the conversation, Gazel had a hunch. If the demon was truly as strong as a demon lord, and if it truly wanted to cause destruction, there'd be no time for Blumend to seek aid since, by the time aid arrived, they'd already be wiped out. Therefore, there must have been a contract. Just like seeing humans suffer, Ket stated a lie. Through Tyrant, Gazel peered into his true thoughts. I mustn't close the fact that the demon demanded worship. This was the one and only thing King Blumend stated I must not say. Religion. Gazel mentally sighed. Could the demon be reaching for godhood? If so, the problem will resolve by itself. Blumend might no longer exist afterwards, but it'll be dead before it targets Dworgen. Apologies, but we are unable to provide any aid, Gazel sternly refused their desperate request. King Gazel, please reconsider, Ket begged, becoming more pitiful by the second. It's a shame, but the fact that the invading demon is gathering worship is enough evidence that he's not related to either of the aforementioned demon lords in any way. In fact, one of them might show up to end things themselves if the demon does happen to ascend. The only problem is if the demon happens to not ascend, but instead invades Dworgen, but Gazel believed he could handle it then. After all, fighting with favorable terrain is far easier than in a plains-like field in Blumend. Though it's a shame that they wouldn't be able to claim the reparations for providing aid the first time, but losses should be cut before they grow bigger. Dwarf, see the men out, Gazel commanded his subordinate. Without giving the men a second look, Gazel turned his back and walked away. Let's go. Muru pleaded as he attempted to drag Shiro out of her room. For the last few months, she's been stuck inside her room, doing God knows what. For God's sake, how could anyone stay holed up for so long? Shiro gave a short reply before throwing a cobweb to anchor Muru into the ground, but the attempt was futile. For someone of Muru's capabilities, it was simply dodged. Greater teleportation. Muru casted. From the time Muru spent with Momonga, Muru managed to learn quite a few new spells from Momonga. It's not to say he didn't give anything in return, but Muru is mostly just the student at the moment. Shiro proudly proclaimed after the teleportation seemingly failed. In the short time Muru entered her room, it seems Shiro has set up a barrier to block spatial movements. It was an admirable feat to do so in such a short time, but now was not the time to be praising such an achievement. In the short moment of confusion, Shiro slipped from Muru's grasp, activating her accelerator skill to escape. In this state, nobody could catch her. What's going on? Momonga's voice came from the entrance. Why wait, why are you here? Muru exclaimed in surprise. It's well past the agreed-upon time, so I thought I'd check up on you. Affirmative, it is 2 hours and 12 minutes past the appointed time. I wanted to introduce you to my friend. Might it be that spider hiding over there? Momonga pointed at Shiro. Yeah, but she's not really too keen on meeting new people. Does she have the same origin as us? By origin, Momonga referred to being an otherworlder. Then, I ought to introduce myself, Momonga showed a calm attitude. He slowly walked over to Shiro, seemingly treating her as one would a stray cat. I am Mamanga, but I used to be known as Suzuki Satoru. He reached out for a handshake, but it seems the interactions were simply too much. Shiro said. It wasn't a request, but rather a forced command. Through Isolator, she can ban anything from entering her space, and as such, Muru was kicked out of her room. This was the second reason why he couldn't get Shiro to leave her room. Should she ever feel like at any point, she can cut off communication with Muru through her skills. Another failed attempt, my lord. Abiru jested. I know, but I can't give up. For now, I'll leave to do more with Mamanga, Muru replied, looking around for Mamanga, who's supposed to be kicked out with him. However, he was nowhere to be seen. Shiro shouted like an anime protagonist would when using a special move. While in her head it felt quite cool, the reality wasn't really as grandiose from an outsider's perspective. Well, it's not like there'll be anyone there to mock her, so all's good. Except that there was someone there to witness her embarrassing moment. Why didn't he get ejected? Shiro pondered, unable to handle the sudden new social interaction. She's gotten used to the Dragonauts, Kijins, and Muru, but a monster as scary as the skeleton in front of her was a no-go. Ahem, what's your name? Mamanga asked again. Seeing no other choice, Shiro was forced into an unescapable encounter. Shirori, she reluctantly answered. Shirori. Ah, I see, Mamanga pieced together the reasoning behind her name and nickname. Well, I've heard worse. Perhaps because Mamanga was too relaxed, he had let his inner thoughts out. As such, Shiro suddenly went into a fury, disregarding all her prior nervousness due to the implication of her name being bad. Flying squirrel, Shiro mocked. Mamanga replied, not showing any expression at Shiro's blatant attempt at mocking his rightfully terrible name. To Mamanga it simply sounded like she'd said Mamanga, since flying squirrel and Mamanga carry the same pronunciation in their native tongue. In her frustration, Shiro attempted to pull a little prank by using her demonic eyes of curses. Usually, it was a useless effect like sluggishness, lack of energy, drunkenness, or other minor effects. It's only on rare occasions she'd hit the jack out and get overpowered effects like blinded, hallucinations, or fear. This time, it appears a minor effect was chosen judging from the intensity of magical energy that came from her eyes. What did you do? Mamanga stumbled around for a bit, holding his head up with his hand. Shiro proudly proclaimed, feeling pleased for the praise that Mamanga gave. Headache. No, it feels like a hangover. Mamanga tried to reason down the exact effects, but it was extraordinarily hard to pinpoint. Though a skeleton shouldn't be able to feel drunk nor dizzy, the effects were causing something similar. Moreover, the list of potential effects was far too large to guess from. Aspect of elemental. In an instance, Mamanga regained his footing like nothing ever happened. Since my presence here clearly isn't welcomed, I'll leave you a present and hope you reconsider next time. Mamanga reached his hand into a black void, pulling out a white gift box tied with red ribbons. The appearance of the box looked like the very first thing that came to mind when one thought of a gift. See you next time, Mamanga left on an ominous note. It wasn't the fact that the gift seemed malicious, but it was the fact that she'd have to interact with him once again. She already used up all of her social battery early this morning interacting with Muru, so she'd much rather spend the rest of the day alone. That said, she wouldn't mind if Mamanga came again once her battery did recharge. Now, she'd have a look at what present he left behind. Mamanga, so you finally got kicked out, Muru smirked. It's whatever, Mamanga tried to be stern, but in reality, he was slightly pouting at being unable to connect with Shiro. Well, let's get going. Through gate, the travel was shortened from a few days to mere seconds. Though the travel was normally quite pleasant and was actually what Mamanga enjoyed in MMORPGs, it wasn't worth the hassle to do so every day just for magic research. However, today's purpose was something else. Muru, now armed with more Yggdrasil knowledge and generally more knowledgeable about this world's mechanics through his skills, was needed to analyze the fight between Mamanga and Lionel. Ah, Lord Mamanga, welcome back. Demiurge greeted Momonga with a smile with the utmost sincerity like he always did. Is that Sir Muru by your side? Momonga responded with confidence. With the passing of days, Muru was declared to be a close friend of Nazarik's and any animosity was to be forgotten. For the Momonga's citizens, it was quite easy to accept someone they'd never met, even more so when that someone is quite strong. Muru, similarly, easily accepted Nazarik's people, but the same couldn't be said for some of their denizens. One of such was Demiurge, who always irked him in the wrong way. Either way, he tried to remain positive. Muru hid his discomfort with a forced smile, one which Demiurge clearly saw through. Haha, it's great to see you, Demiurge enthusiastically replied, but knowing him, it was likely all an act. Anyways, Lord Momonga, would you like to hear about the progress on the plan? We can discuss that later. Of course, please call upon me whenever convenient. The plan they talked about involved strengthening the foundation of Nazarik, which is mainly carried out through the invading Blumend under the false persona of Jaldabaoth. While all Momonga wanted to do was test out two of his hypotheses, it seems Demiurge misinterpreted the plan and made it into something far bigger than need be. He came up with the plan, but its current scale was on a level that even Momonga himself didn't know the exact details of. Nonetheless, his small brain did know that the plan's details shouldn't ever be discussed in front of Muru, who held on to more of his humanity than he ever did. Entering the research facility, Momonga unveiled a magic orb, one that held the recording of the fight between Lionel and Momonga. In an attempt to figure out exactly how strong demon lords are, everyone in Nazarik, ranging from the normal citizens who weren't allowed into the tomb to even the floor guardians, already watched the video dozens of times. Now, it was time for Muru to watch it and give his opinion. What do you think? Momonga inquired. Well, you lost, and I don't think you could have won no matter what you did, Muru gave the harsh truth. Wait, I'm not saying you're weak. It's just that the opponent was too strong. Then, in realization of what he said, he tried to correct his mistake, but every bit of his word was true. His analysis was the one that everyone who's watched the recording had. Perhaps with the combined force of Nazarik they'd stand a chance, but Momonga wasn't willing to sacrifice nearly everyone to unnecessarily anger yet another demon lord. The real concern was if Clayman was weaker or stronger than Lionel. Hey, at least you damage him, Muru pointed out, rewinding the recording to when Thor's Wrath, which was what Momonga decided to dub the spell that took 12 whole minutes to cast, first landed. Slowing the recording down to a billionth of a second, the rod could be seen piercing through Lionel's flesh, tearing through his skin, muscles, and bones with little to no resistance. This was yet another thing that some guardians noticed, but there was no real information other than the one divulged by Lionel to be obtained. Yes, he's a spiritual life form. Apparently he has immunity to physical attacks. I assume there's other traits, but we can't conclude things without a specimen, Momonga answered. But I know exactly what a spiritual life form is though. Momonga exclaimed in surprise. To think the answer had been here all along. My best friend Veldora is a spiritual life form, and through my abilities, I can get information about them. First of all, there's only two ways to kill them. You have to either break their soul, or make them die from energy loss. Second, every single one of them is powerful without exception. Not every powerful individual is a spiritual life form, but every spiritual life form is strong. Third, apparently, they don't rely on their physical body, but exist as souls free from the system. Do you know how to become one? Well, actually, if I cross-examine the traits of Lionel with other individuals I've come across. Could the lack of health indicate their reliance on magicules for everything? No, there must be a third resource. I need a spell to examine the soul. Momonga silently concluded. Momonga, could I ask something? Go ahead. What happened here? Muru sped forward to the head but that Lionel gave Momonga. After this, Momonga's fighting style completely changed. Instead of disguising himself as a magic swordsman and hiding his unique skills, he decided to forego everything and reveal his tools. Yes, it allowed him to match the suppressed Lionel for a moment, but it seemed out of character for Momonga. What's so weird about it? Momonga questioned, not registering the validity of the question. You became a different person. No, I was still me, Momonga brushed it off. For whatever reason, Momonga was unable to comprehend what happened, almost as if there's a cognition block in place. No, you need dash. Muru was unable to find the exact words that'd get through to Momonga. Just keep an eye on yourself. Let's start researching. Putting aside the recording and concerns about Momonga's state, they started research on magic, specifically magic related to the soul. Chapter 54, Dark Hero I. Following Momonga's plan, which has now been modified so much that it was unrecognizable from his original plan, Momonga was forced to pose yet again as Musasabi. It was part of his plans to plant the fake demon Lord Jaldabaoth such that they can test how much the effects of worshipping and massacring humans has in relation to awakening, and it was also part of his plan for Musasabi to come in and defeat the new demon lord in an attempt to shift the worship onto the persona should it prove to have any effect on strength. Thinking back on how things went between the two, it went something like, Lord Momonga, might I ask a question? Demiurge inquired. If worship does prove to have an effect, why not intervene yourself? Your persona as the demon Lord Momonga has incredible infamy, but there's yet to be any feat backing the title aside from assisting King Gazel against the orc disaster. No, I must fight Jaldabaoth as Musasabi, Momonga insisted. While one might think there might be some grand reason, Momonga just wanted to pose as a hero for a little while. Moreover, he saw no reason why directing the source of worship from Jaldabaoth to Musasabi would be anything different from diverting it to himself. After all, they were the same person, so the effect should remain the same. Could it be? Yes, of course. I see now. Demiurge came to some weird conclusion by himself. Whatever plans he reasoned out, Momonga was thankful, but in hindsight, this was probably where things started derailing. However, Demiurge, your assistance is of the utmost importance. Should there be something I overlooked or a mistake I make, I expect you to fill in the gaps. Of course. I'll ensure that you, Lord Momonga, will be satisfied with the end result. Well, that was how the story went. Therefore, since Momonga gave Demiurge permission to alter the plan however he wished, he now knew close to nothing about the plan he came up with. It's not like he had much of a plan in the first place. Ultimately, the rough outline was to prop up a demon lord, defeated as Musasabi, and become worshipped. If possible, he also wanted to use the event to undergo a harvest festival like Geld did, but the inner workings of it were still unknown. Sir Musasabi, perhaps we should switch locations. A red-skinned ogre with a bronze-like shine asked. This was Gobkichi, one of the goblins summoned with the horn of the goblin general. Prior to naming him, he was the strongest goblin after Ro and Rigard, and after naming, he became the second strongest hobgoblin. He even went on journeys with Ro during his hobgoblin days, exploring ruins and dungeons. Recently, he managed to evolve into an ogre, but unfortunately, unlike Ro, he had no blessing despite his unique composition. It seems that ogres are inherently a race with varying skin colors. Now, as for why he's posing as an adventurer. Due to Ro's sudden leave, Momonga wanted to fill the spot with someone of a similar stature. Call it a stupid longing for familiarity, but the official reason is that a three-person party suddenly shrinking down to two wouldn't look good on their records. Perhaps we'll need to go closer to the headquarters, Musasabi replied. Currently, their goal was to become involved with the subjugation of the demon Lord Jaldabaoth somehow, so they're searching for a guild that has said request. Why not go straight to Blumend? Lupus Regina, the healer of the party, asked. If a random group of adventurers come along and defeat the new demon lord, they'd think it was because the demon was weak rather than Sir Musasabi being strong. Of course we need to let things build up a bit, Gobkichi replied. Well, I think it might be wiser to go near Blumend rather than further away. For information to travel to the headquarters, it has to travel through somewhere else first, right? Lupus Regina said something rather smart for once. However suspicious those words sounded, not one person near them could hear it since everything was being transmitted via telepathy through Momonga's ultimate skill. To outsiders, they'd simply look like they were staring at the request board for an excessively long time. To not drag it out too long, Musasabi grabbed a request that led them closer to the headquarters. After more thinking, Lupus Regina's logic seemed pretty sound, but they were already so close to the headquarters, so they might as well commit. The quest was an escort request in the direction of Ingracia. Currently, they were in a western nation near the border of the Holy Empire of Riberius, so this would probably land them in their destination. Arriving in the Est Grand Beast Kingdom, the scenery was a majestic one. Starting from the castle walls that spanned miles beyond the horizon, and the lush fields of wheat, fruits, and a variety of other crops. With all of the vegetation, it looked like one massive rainbow. Then, in the middle, there was one massive palace, one so big that it might as well be another town. What was truly impressive was the palace that covered the mountain behind it. Pretty neat, huh? Carrion commented. We get those reactions a lot. Being beasts and whatnot, they always expected us to be more savage, but it's not like fighting and pillaging will put food on the plate. Yeah, Geld replied in a daze, thinking back to how he ruled his kingdom. Though his lands certainly weren't as fertile, learning these techniques certainly would have helped. Perhaps it'd be different right now if we weren't so isolated. Mare, do you see that? We're here. Aura shouted, riding her beast as she ran past the carriage Geld and Carrion was sitting in with Mare behind her back. The energy of youth. I can hardly keep up, but I must fulfill my duty as well, Geld noted, getting out of his carriage as well. This was a cultural exchange after all, one where they learned more about each other's country such that an alliance could be properly formed. There was no point if all he did during the visit was sit inside a cramped carriage. I'll act as your guide, Carrion followed up. It'd be a pleasure. Geld replied before turning his attention to Seabass. Sir Geld, I'll follow up soon after somewhere to park the carriages, Seabass confirmed. You ought to watch Lady Aura and Sir Mare before they get lost. Of course, Geld replied without much thought, but orcs weren't exactly the fastest type of monster, and he'd much rather not exhaust himself running, so he simply sped up his walk. Though they were just seconds behind the two kids, the two of them were already long lost in the crowd of lycanthropes. A lycanthrope wearing rags bumped into Geld while looking behind him, dropping a bag of fruits and pastry. Oi, big guy. What are you standing like an idiot for? Get out of the way, he tried pushing Geld aside, but upon realizing that Geld wouldn't budge, and was too heavy to be shoved aside, he simply ran past him instead. It was a little rude, yes, but Geld didn't particularly mind it. It was his fault for standing idly by in a busy street. Then, running after that lycanthrope was another one who had transformed into a massive bear, easily pinning down the escaping man. Little rat, you're not escaping today, the bearman raised the other man into the air with one hand, choking the breath out of him. He tried to resist by transforming into a raccoon, but it didn't provide much help as his eyes turned white. With the fading of his consciousness, his bestialization was slowly undoing itself as well. I think you need to let go, Geld approached him, asking for the fainted lycanthrope's release. Who are you? The bearman asked, but he showed no intent on letting the raccoonman go. If you'll excuse me, Geld tried to be polite, but since it looked like the raccoonman was about to die, he acted in the most rational way possible to save the raccoon's life. Grabbing onto the bear's arm, Geld squeezed it gently until the sound of bones cracking could be heard. He meant to just pry open man's grip, but he hadn't expected the massive man to have such a weak body. However, the man wasn't weak. The bear in front of him was at the very least in the hazard class. Rather, it was Geld who had become far too strong after the Harvest Festival and being granted a name by Mamanga. Even if the awakening was interrupted halfway through, he still reaped a lot of benefits from it despite not awakening a new unique skill. Fucking hell. The bear squealed in pain, pulling his hands out from Geld's grasp. You should have said something if you were so strong. I'm sorry about that. Let me look for a potion. Geld searched his magical bag for a potion, but before he could find it, the bear was already gone. Piss off, the bear ran off, clearly looking upset, but he didn't unleash his anger on Geld, instead detransforming and going back the way he came from. The raccoon, who was just near death's door, had skedaddled from the scene. Similarly, the fruits and pastry that scattered on the ground were no longer there. "It's a nice city, isn't it?" Carrion remarked after finally catching up to Geld. His words carried his usual monotone voice, but it almost sounded sarcastic, perhaps said even, to Geld, who felt a sense of kinship with Carrion. After all, he put up the same tight facade when leading the orcs. If a leader doubts their life, what would it make of their loyal followers who diligently acted upon their will? "Couldn't you change it?" Geld asked, ignoring the obvious attempt Carrion made at keeping conversation away from the minor crimes running rampant in the streets. "Even if I could, I don't have the right to do so," Carrion meekly replied before changing topics. "Shouldn't you look for the twins now?" Geld realized that he was indeed off task, so he activated mana perception. Out of the many skills he pilfered, this was one he rightfully earned, and also one he mastered to a great extent in an attempt to search for his kin. In a vast desert, it'd be dumb to scour every inch hoping to meet his starving citizen by chance, so he needed to master this skill. Soon after, he sensed two familiar signatures. Unsurprisingly, he managed to find the twins Mare and Aura, who were currently eating candy apples in front of a stall. "Mare, Aura, how could you run off without me?" Geld tried to reprimand them, but knowing they were children, and that he was not their legal guardian, he had to keep his tone passive. "These things cost 1 silver coin for 2 sticks. What a rip-off, yet I still brought 4. Anyways, Geld, try it." Aura offered one of the candy apples. No, I couldn't," Geld refused. He'd much rather save his appetite for something casual instead of candy, but it was to no avail. "Stop being so stubborn and eat," Aura shoved the apple into his mouth. Geld tried to speak, but his speech was muffled by the apple. "Where's Seabass? I ought to give this last one to him." "He's somewhere in that direction," Carrion pointed in the direction of their carriage. In an instant, Aura ran off, dragging Mare with her. The boy didn't mind clearly, but such social interaction wasn't the norm for the boy. Fortunately, Geld managed to follow them this time. Aura shouted. "Haha, sorry Lady Aura, but I already ate," Seabass refused. "Perhaps Sir Gabru over here would like it more." Aura hesitated, making a face of disgust. To Nazarik's denizen, if humans are viewed as less than dirt, then outside monsters would be the dirt. They'd be able to tolerate the existence of dirt, but it'd be weird for them to be talking to them, much less being kind to them. In fact, Seabass was the exception for treating Gabru so kindly. Other than Seabass, Cocytus was perhaps the only one who viewed them as significant due to his admiration for warriors. Even Geld barely managed to become somewhat of an equal, after being granted a title by Lord Mamanga. This was a fact that Geld learned quite well over the past few months, and also one he wished to change, yet he was powerless to do so. If he made a petition to Lord Mamanga, there would be the slightest of chance, but it'd be wrong to force his opinion onto others, so he held back for now. "We're allies now, Lady Aura. It's only proper to treat them as you would to someone from Nazarik or under Lord Mamanga's rule." Aura gave up. Gabru celebrated, taking his time savoring the candy apple. "I'm sorry for my son's greediness." Abira came out of the carriage as well, apologizing to Seabass as he did so. "It's fine. His personality is quite likable." "Ho, thank you for the praise," Abira laughed, but his eyes that pierced into Gabru's soul clearly did not. If a stare could kill, Gabru would have died 10 times over by now. Carrion coughed to gather their attention. "Let's go further into the capital. There's nothing interesting in the outskirts." "Sounds fine," Seabass agreed. "All right, lead the way," Geld concurred, but his true feelings were slightly different. From what he heard about Lionel's past, while this did match his expectations based on Lionel's current personality, he thought it'd have a more friendly atmosphere. Things do appear lively on the surface, yes, but beneath it all, the shopkeeper he met earlier was quick to resort to violence, and crimes run rampant without anyone caring. Then, there's the fact that the disparity between the living standards of the poor and the strong. He tried his best to ignore it since this kingdom wasn't his, but he saw more than a few starving children inside the dark alleyways. With each passing minute, he wanted ever the more to approach them, but what could a disaster like him do? Within the confines of Nazarick, he could serve his kind and Lord Mamanga, but here he'd only mess up more. As he left to go deeper into the capital, he saw within the corner of his eyes a beastman beating up another smaller one. It seemed like he was the only one who saw that, or perhaps the others just didn't care enough to take action. Either way, the path that Carrion led them through was a peaceful one without any conflict, causing Geld to temporarily dismiss his thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland. Chapter 55, Dark Hero 2 Chapter Text Muru. The sound of blades clashing was heard throughout Muru's manor. Cocytus complimented Lord Mamanga's friend. Like how he trained with Mamanga to better his magical skills, he worked hard to better his swordsmanship with Benimaru. However, now that Benimaru wasn't present, he asked Mamanga for a sparring partner, which he happily complied with. While copying Benimaru's skills was always an option, he always felt that abilities earned in such a way were not truly his own. Thank you. Muru reciprocated his feelings. While he didn't want to say Benimaru was a bad teacher, he learned far more in the past week training with Cocytus than the months he did with Benimaru. The two's blades clashed once more before they disengaged as to not give the other an edge. Contrary to what anime and shows led Muru to believe, there were hardly any flashy blade clashes nor big movements. In reality, it was a game of space management, one where quick decisions and space management determined the winner. In a game of equals, the blade moved far faster than the mind could process, so they were always trying to predict each other's movement rather than rely on instincts alone. For the first time during their spar, Muru took advantage of his slime characteristics, shape-shifting to surprise the opponent. In a small moment, Cocytus tumbled back, leaving only his feet in range of Muru's blade. Taking advantage of it, Muru went for a low sweep with his wooden katana. Cocytus yet again praised him, but before the blade reached Cocytus's feet, there was a sword by Muru's neck. Successfully. Incapacitate. Vulnerable. You're far too strong. Muru jokingly complained, but he was satisfied with the spar. Swordsmanship. Wise, Cocytus replied, seemingly not getting the joke. Either way, it worked well in Muru's favor. Notice, an immense magical signature is rapidly approaching. There's someone dangerous coming, Muru informed Cocytus. Cocytus' tone got a little more serious, as he pulled out for more blades from some sort of subspace. One was a blue halberd, another was a katana nearly 2 meters long, the third was a long metal kanabo that was longer than the aforementioned katana, and the last was a naginata with a blade on both sides. Each weapon was of a different length, which helped Cocytus divvy up his zones so as to not be weak even when the opponent closes the distance. Notice, energy signature is directly above boom. Out from the roof, a cloud of dust was kicked up as the unknown individual landed. Purpose, Cocytus asked instead of outright attacking the invader. Wahahaha. Hello there, little slime. A familiar childish, female voice came from the smoke beneath, and a new one I haven't seen before. Demon Lord Malim, what brings you here? Muru inquired. There were many possibilities forming in his mind, some bad, some good, but nonetheless, this meant trouble. Give me good food, she demanded, leaving Muru speechless. To think such a great, albeit childish, individual came to him just for food. It made Muru harbor second thoughts about her true objective, but it was dubious if someone who competed with her peer, and who had the most grandiose title could even form such hidden plans in the first place. All right, Muru reluctantly agreed, taking some food out from his stockpile. For someone like her, the best choice was sweets, and due to not having any candy, he chose the closest substitute, which was honey. There goes my snack for the week, Muru silently mourned. What's this? Malim yelled, her hair standing on its ends as her lips curved up into a wide smile. Give me more, she demanded like a child would. Looking again, Malim's image in Muru's mind as a terrifying demon lord started to fade as a new, more immature image took its place. As for how to deal with these types of people, Muru had a great idea. Only if you give something in return. Yuwa. Melim pondered her head, thinking of what she could do to obtain the sweets. How about this? We become friends, and we'll help each other. Sounds good. We'll be friends. All right, here you go. This is the last bottle. Muru tossed her another bottle of honey. It was truly the last bottle, but it'd replenish in a week's time. Momonga. Upon arrival in Ingracia, the technology was so advanced that it was hard to believe this was supposed to be a medieval-setting fantasy world. There weren't any cars, smartphones, or things of the sort, but the buildings were oddly modern. Even the headquarters where the quests were posted used a different system from the ones in the outskirts. Pust, look, an ogre, one of the passing adventurers whispered. What's a monster doing here? Gobkichi, they're talking about you, Lupusagina quietly informed Gobkichi. It's fine. I'm not particularly bothered, Gobkichi replied. It was all audible, but the party decided to ignore it to not cause a scene. Looking at the board, there were no signs of any Jaldaboth subjugation. Guess we went the wrong way after all, Lupusagina sighed, her tone becoming more casual by the passing days. As an adventurer, the way she treated Musasabi was so different from how she treated Momonga that she might as well be two different people. Let's do some quests to kill some time. There's a gemstone serpent subjugation request here, Momonga suggested. There's no rush. After all, if a force were to be gathered without them, he was confident that Demiurge would inform them. Hey, are you perchance Musasabi? The voice of a young boy came from upstairs. Looking up, the figure was the very same one Momonga met during the post-war conference. He was Yuki Kagurasaka. Guildmaster Kagurasaka. Momonga pretended to not know the man, though the attempt was likely futile since Musasabi and Momonga were names far too similar to be different people for someone of Japanese descent. Yes, I am the Guildmaster. Do you have a spare moment to chat? Momonga wanted to refuse the invitation so badly, but what type of adventurer would have the audacity to refuse an audience from the top man himself? If they did, they're either ignorant, arrogant, or stupid, and Momonga didn't want to appear as any of those. Of course, can my companions come with me? No problem at all, Yuki gestured to us to follow him up. With his invitation, the whole guild stared daggers into the three adventurers until they were out of sight. Have a seat. In his room, there were bookshelves, and if his eyes were working correctly, these were mangas, and the room was very much Japanese. It must have been a pain to recreate these from memory, especially when the technology in this world is so far behind. What did you call us for? Momonga inquired. Nothing much. At first I wasn't so sure, but now, I'm pretty confident I'm right. We're of the same kind, aren't we, Musasabi? Perhaps I should call you Momonga. At the mention of Momonga's real name, Gobkichi reached for the battle-axe and tower shield he was carrying, while Lupusagina started casting buffs on the party. However, their actions were stopped by a single hand gesture from Momonga. Yes, what of it? As I thought. Yuki's smile grew. Where did you come from? Tokyo, and you? Momonga decided to keep it short. However much he wanted to form bonds with someone of his world, his instincts warned him against the man. Whether it was his experience dealing with corporate higher-ups or just a general dislike of the man, he didn't feel the need to open up to him. I'm from Tokyo as well. What year are you from? 2012, Momonga lied. Damn, so what happened with Dragon Ball? What about Saint Seiya? I didn't read much manga, Momonga truthfully said. They were far too expensive for someone of his salaries. Moreover, most books had been banned, so he couldn't access them in the first place. However, such might not be true for someone who actually came from 2012, so he decided to not say too much, and just imply that he wasn't into manga in general. He did, however, wish he had the time and money to read them. What did you do then? I played video games. Anyways, what did you call us for? It couldn't be mere chit-chat. Right. Recently, news of Jaldaboth has reached us. It's the very same demon that you allow escape on that day. We'd like to ask for your help in defeating it. The perfect opportunity just presented itself to him. If he took it, then he'd be on his way to fulfilling his goal. However, he couldn't help but feel he was playing into Yuki's hand. And the payment? Momonga decided not to think too deeply. If anything, he believed in Demiurge's ability to outsmart whatever plans Yuki had. It'll be 100 gold coins for A+ rank parties, 60 for A rank parties, and 30 for anyone of the B rank. Though you're currently B ranks, I believe you could pass the A rank evaluation, so I'll pay you accordingly. After this quest, we could probably rank you up to A. Momonga pondered, seeing how the rewards are far lower than anticipated for a threat on the level of a demon lord. Please man. Yuki begged, taking a Dejiza bow. Our reputation's been in the mud after we couldn't contribute much in the previous event. Do your countrymen a favor, please. All right, fine, Momonga agreed, buckling under the pressure. We'll complete another quest in the meantime. Of course, thank you. See you soon. Yuki waved goodbye as his elven secretary saw them out. Yuki Kagarazaka. It's been a while since I've seen you like that, Kigali commented, speaking up now that the visitor has left. Sigh, I don't think it worked, Yuki sighed. He seems pretty cautious. Haha, do you plan on getting rid of him? If I could, but it seems improbable for now, Yuki slouched back, frustrated that there was yet another obstacle in the way of his plans. What about Jaldabaoth? I wish I could just ignore it, but they're pretty much forcing my hand. If we don't show substantial results, countries might hesitate to work with the Free Guild in the future. If that Momonga fellow orchestrated everything, he'd be a truly terrifying person. That just means we'd have to get rid of him ever the more. Perhaps we could pit him against Hinata or Granbell. That'd certainly be for the best, but there's no reason for them to move. We just have to make one then, Yuki grinned, thinking of his next moves. If they're a threat to humanity, Granbell would surely make some sort of move. Moreover, if we could, per se, expose them for being the ones behind the demon summon, all countries would break their ties par for the ones. Human countries, yes, but I'm not too sure about those ruled by demon lords. If I was still Kazarium, I wouldn't particularly mind. That said, how are you adjusting to your new body? It's whatever. At least it works, she said coldly, but her smile betrayed her intent. Momonga outside the border of Blumund, it was evident that it hadn't been properly cared for since Jaldabaoth invaded. It was starting to look more like a slum rather than a proper village. Even the farmland that once used to house crops now held tents made of cloth, stick, and other miscellaneous items found on the ground. Absolutely disgusting, one of the A-rank adventurer Gay commented. Out of everyone here, he was the only solo A-rank, meaning his abilities must be on par with his fame, or it could mean that his personality is just so terrible that nobody wants to work with him as Momonga had observed so far. Let's try gathering information, Momonga suggested with his Musasabi persona. A B-rank dares to order me. Gay mocked. He was slightly wrong in that Musasabi was actually a B+ rank, but it was still a rank lower nonetheless. Guys, calm down. I think what Musasabi said had a reason, the de facto leader of the group spoke up. Despite not being the highest ranked one present, he had some sort of aura around him that, when we were voting for the leader, made everyone unanimously agree. Even his appearance was that of the typical summoned to another world main character. Fine, I'll let it go because it's Yuki. I'll go off on my own. On top of that, he was an otherworlder, so it further cemented the stereotype. Sorry about that, Musasabi, Masayuki apologized in place of Gay. No, it's fine. That said, are you an otherworlder as well? Yes, and I assume you are too. Momonga exposed himself without much concern. Despite his prior aggression towards Yuki, his impression of Masayuki was far better. In actuality, Momonga wanted to invite Masayuki over to Nazarick for some unknown reason, but his logical mind managed to keep his weird desires at bay. Yep, and say, if you don't mind me asking, what rank are you? Also, where's your party? We be plus rank, and my party members are over there. Momonga pointed at the ogre Gobkichi, and werewolf Lupus Regina behind him. What about yours? Ah, there yo, Masayuki. Where have you gone wandering off to? A tough muscular guy with a mohawk along with two other individuals came up to him. These are my party members. Jinrai, Jiwoo, and Bernie. They were certainly an odd group, but it still bore the classic protagonist vibe that Momonga would expect from him. Excluding the mohawk guy mentioned prior, there was a short blue-haired girl, and a nerd with glasses. Masayuki. Jaldaboth's underlings found us. Another adventurer shouted while running away from a demon. It was a grotesque green humanoid blob that carried the faces of hundreds of human, man, woman, elderly, and child alike. Normally, by this world's standard, it would have been just B+ rank, but seeing the number of faces on it, it's likely A rank by now. Prepare for battle. Momonga shouted, taking Masayuki's place of command. Being experienced adventurers, none of them panicked and instead took up their arms. Starting the battle, the demon, also known as overeating in Yggdrasil terms, leaped multiple dozen meters into the sky. Despite its size, it was surprisingly nimble, though this only applied to its jumping capabilities. Before it could land, Gobkichi lunged up into the air, winding up his massive battle axe and attempting to behead the demon. However, the layer of fat on it was far too thick, causing the axe to be wedged in the demon's body. Realizing this, Gobkichi instead opted for a kick, using the lodged axe as leverage to kick the demon away. Despite being in the air, the demon showed no signs of moving, and all he could manage to do was to free his axe. At the same time, the mages and archers fired their ranged attacks, which only managed to inflict minor scratches on the demon. With such a massive wind-up, it was obvious where the landing was going to take place. As such, all of the adventurers managed to escape the trajectory before it was too late. However, what they did not account for was the demon's mass. With its ability to increase its mass the more it ate, Momonga reasoned it to weigh at least 10 tons by now. Like an asteroid dropping onto the ground cracked and dust kicked up, creating a shockwave that destabilized the nearby adventurer's footing. Taking advantage of this, the demon went on to grab the nearest adventurer, which was Masayuki. In one fell gulp, the demon swallowed the otherworlder that Momonga just got to know, but instead of growing a new face, the demon showed signs of asphyxiation as it reached for its throat, and its skin turned to a lighter shade of green. Masayuki. All of his party members expressed concern before lunging a suicidal charge at the monster. Before they managed to reach him, the demon fainted, dropping flat on its face with Masayuki slowly being spit out from its mouth. Masayuki killed the demon. One of the adventurers shouted. Following him, many other adventurers cheered him on. Lord Momonga, did you see that? Gobkichi asked via telepathy. To my knowledge, overeating has never once choked on its food, and yet, it just happens to do so now. I suspect this to be his unique skill, Gobkichi finished. Masayuki, are you alright? Momonga rushed over to express his concerns. For whatever reason, no matter what they did, Masayuki was always the center of attention. If this was the case, they might need to eliminate the variable. Otherwise, it wouldn't be any fun to roleplay as a hero when nobody recognizes his achievements or falsely attributes it. Oddly enough, Momonga felt a notation of disgust at the thought of bringing harm to Masayuki. It wasn't strong enough to make Momonga disregard his thoughts of eliminating him, but it was out of line for him. Yeah, that was my first time being swallowed. It looked like my sword managed to stab his heart while he was swallowing me. I'm surprised you got so lucky. What do you mean lucky? Masayuki planned for it. Jinrai tried to correct Momonga before being interrupted by Masayuki. Wait, lucky? You can tell it's luck. Masayuki's eyes lit up in surprise. Yeah, why? It's related to my skill. I'll tell you about it later in a not-so-crowded place. Despite outright stating this fact, nobody around seems to doubt Masayuki's skills. In fact, it looked like the cheering only got louder as they praised Masayuki as humble. Perception and luck manipulation, Momonga attempted to conclude a few of his abilities from the statement. Furthermore, after scanning every adventurer present, there were two oddities. You see, we demon lords are what's known as spiritual life forms, or at the very least, something close to it, Momonga recalled Lionel's statement. Bernie and Jiwoo bore characteristics similar to Lionel, which is to say, 0 hit points, and a massive mana pool. Further, with the development of the new spell Soul Essence, Momonga saw that their soul was surprisingly large as well for adventurers, larger than even the Floor Guardian souls. Fortunately, Jinrai and Masayuki's stats seemed normal for their ranks, though Masayuki seems a little below standards. Even if Momonga couldn't remove these variables, he at the very least wanted to discover some information about them. For now, Momonga simply prayed that Demiurge accounted for these variables, so he didn't have to worry much about it. Here, take this, Momonga reached into his pockets, taking out a towel. In reality, he simply opened his inventory and took it out, but he disguised it. Thank you, Musasabi. With this minor action, Momonga's reputation instantly shot up through the roof, gaining the trust of the adventurers present. Normally, such an action wouldn't mean much, but it seems under Masayuki's unique skill, it added significance to the action. If elimination was impossible, he'd need to take advantage of it or discern the extent to which it can mask reality, whether it be aiding Masayuki or purposefully excluding him. As the journey went on, Momonga thought about how he would be able to act more heroic.